Hi guys, Fabio Palvelli here with the D2 Talks. This week on the show I have Richard Benson of Pikcells, a creative agency based in the UK. I've had the chance to meet Richard a few months back at the D2 conference in Vienna. We had a small chat. He was a very inspiring person and I'm very happy to have him on the show. Hit the like button if you like this video, share it with your friends to get the conversation going, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. See you guys next week and enjoy the talk. And we're recording. Ladies and gentlemen, I have with us today Richard Benson of Pikcells. How are you, man? Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having us on, Fabio. It's a privilege to be on here.
My pleasure, man.
Pikcells. Yeah.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you, mate.
I'm very happy that you took the time to do this interview. I really wanted to talk to you after I met you in person at the D2. Richard, let me ask you a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and how you guys became who you are today.
So we started straight out of university. I originally wanted to study architecture, but my lazy, naive 18-year-old self saw that it was 7 years and decided that was too long at university. But had I known what I know now about how much fun university is, I probably would have gone down the architecture route. But instead I did product design, which was a fantastic course. Taught me a lot about critical thinking, researching, how to design a product or something from start to finish, and all those skills are really useful when you're setting up a business because, everything kind of needs a bit of research, and then you build prototypes, and then you test it, and then you kind of iteratively design the final product. And it's kind of, these things apply in business and in most things you're doing in life. So it was a really great course for me to do. And in the final year, we picked up a version of 3D Max, which had Light Tracer on it. I don't know if you remember that, 3D Max 5 with Light Tracer.
Nope.
Before you but it was the first, it was a kind of skylight illuminator, different to Radiosity, but it was brilliant. And coming from SolidWorks, which we use on the course, this was just a mind-blowing rendering engine for me. So me and Steve lived together in the final year. Steve's the director at Pikcells, and he was doing interior design, and he'd been getting a lot of interior design companies contacting him. So this is 2002, 2003. So virtually nobody could use 3D software back then. So he was getting a lot of people asking him to do renders of designs of bars and restaurants and commercial spaces. So things didn't look that promising after university. There weren't many jobs around in my industry, definitely. So Steve suggested we just set something up and start producing renders for these interior design companies. And the University of Huddersfield had a really good scheme where they had like a business incubator, and they'd set up a load of cool buildings on the edge of town where there were loads of ex-students starting businesses up. So it was a really good time to set up a business. I think we got a grant for about £5,000 to start the business, which probably lasted us the first year. I don't think we made any money in the first year, or the second year, or the third year. It was only thanks to wives and girlfriends that got us through it. But yeah, that's kind of how we started, and we were doing a lot of ArcViz in the early days. But this kind of fell off a cliff in 2008 when the recession hit, and it was a really bad time. We kind of nearly went bust. And then I think 2009 we managed to get in with a furniture company doing a lot of interior renderings, and it was just right place, right time. People were looking to save money. They were using live sets, so they would go out, source an office interior. And then they would get down there, build all their products, get a photographer, they would light it. It would cost them thousands of pounds, and then we could do it in V-Ray. We could get it looking pretty much as good as a photograph at that time. And it kind of took off from there, really. there's kind of two parts to our business. One was kind of 2003 to 2008. And then I'd say the last 10 years since 2009, that's been kind of phase 2 of Pikcells, where we've really hit our stride. And we've been working a lot in interiors, and then we've kind of slowly grown into all the interactive work, which again has really taken off. It's something we're all really geared up for. We've got a good kind of design department in the office, and everyone's kind of really into the technology and pushing things forward.
I wanted to ask you a question because you were talking about the fact that studying prototyping and testing ideas, it helped you kind of have a touch on reality. Now, the growth of your business was split between these two, let's call them eras, one before the crisis and one after. When did your team start to grow?
It was growing before. So I think there were 5 of us in 2008, and then we started to grow in 2009. I think it was after we'd got into this new market. We grew quite a bit, and in 2012 we moved into much bigger offices. So I think there was about 15 of us in 2012, and now there's 25 of us, and we're looking to grow a bit more.
That's amazing.
But I mean, it's hard to grow. It's hard to know when to grow and when to...
Actually, this is one of the things that I wanted to ask you. How long did it take you for you to understand what it's like to drive a team and make them do things in a productive way? And I want to know it from you because, I can imagine that you as a product designer testing ideas and, prototyping and trying things out. Maybe you have something to share that can help people out that are trying to grow but that struggle with it.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that was really important for us was, we'd get people in and they'd be used to working a certain way, so they'd be used to a certain workflow, a certain pipeline, and then they'd come into our studio and they'd want to still work that way. Mm-hmm. But we work a different way, and then you get this kind of clash of ideologies. Yes. And I don't think that's good for a studio, because everyone, in our experience, if you want to troubleshoot a problem, if you want to guarantee consistency, and if you want to guarantee time frames, then everybody has to be on the same page with pipeline and workflow. So very early on, we started to write down certain things, not everything, not render settings for V-Ray and stuff, because there's loads of things online for that. But we would write down, our kind of modeling workflow. We would write down layers. We would write down material IDs, everything like that. And it started off in Google Docs, and then it's kind of grown and grown. It's been rewritten about 3 or 4 times. It kind of stopped happening because it was just me doing it at one point, and it was just too much for one person. But in its latest form, it's not me updating it anymore, so we've basically assigned different people to update different areas, which works really well. So they kind of take ownership of it. So every time we have a better way of doing something or a new way, the person in charge of that department writes a entry into the knowledge base, we call it. And
that's amazing.
It's great, man, because it's, we get a new person in, we sit them down, and we have a tag for new starters, and they just read that section. So it's got modeling 101, it's got texturing, it's got file names and folders, setups and everything like that. So new people come in and they know pretty much everything they need to know, when they get going, because it is hard inducting new people, and as you get bigger, the turnover of staff can increase. I mean, we've gone through stages where, 5 or 6 people will leave all at once for different reasons, and then you have to find a load more people, train them up quickly. So I think you need these systems in place to be able to bring people up to speed really quickly. It's not a perfect solution, but...
How long does it take for a person to get into this? Like, to be part of your workflow seamlessly?
I don't know. I mean, we have people at the minute who've probably been there they've been there a year and they're still learning. But the important thing is that they're doing things the right way. So I think, to say is somebody competent, that's down to the person's kind of learning speed. But the important thing is that people are doing things the right way, because when we've been slack with this in the past, people have come in and they've not been told that they should always put stuff on a certain layer. They should always have the IDs set to this certain framework. And then very quickly you start to see all these problems when you're rendering. And if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem and you don't know all the variables involved, it's so hard. Whereas if you know everyone's doing modeling this like this, everyone's texturing like that, you can pretty quickly say, all right, well, it's deadline, or it must be something in the render settings. But if people are doing their own thing, then it's hard to kind of troubleshoot that. So the speed at which people learn is kind of down to them, really. But the important thing is that they're doing it the right way. They may be slower to learn it, but as long as they're doing things in a set way, that's all we're kind of bothered about.
This is
initially.
gold. This is gold. I really like that.
Yeah.
I'm reading a couple of books, and, like when we talk about management engineering and how to tune teams on how to do things perfectly, actually these books, there is a guy that talks about this, Simon Sinek, that says that, some processes can take years, 2 or 3 years, and it's like, on one side we have technology that suggests that things should be done a lot quicker and faster. On the other side we have human processes that are not faster because of technology, like, client feedback. Client feedback, it doesn't matter how fast you are at rendering, a client will still take a week sometimes to give back, feedback and stuff.
You're at the mercy of the clients a lot of the time.
Yeah. But anyway, Richard, let me ask you, artists and entrepreneurs, they like to hear other people of the same kind, and they like to listen to their stories to be inspired. Is there a story that has particularly influenced you in the way that you run your business, that you act professionally, or even as an artist, maybe?
Well, this is a tricky one, actually, because I couldn't think of one thing, but the more I thought about this, I've always been a big fan of Pixar, and I've kind of followed all their films. And I think when The Incredibles came out, we had the DVD with the extended features on, the one with Brad Bird.
Yeah.
He was the director, and that was one that always stuck with me, where they were just messing around at Pixar, they were having a lot of fun. They were all very relaxed, riding around on scooters and stuff, but it just looked like a lot of fun, but they were still making, this groundbreaking, cutting-edge work. And that is something that's always kind of stuck with me in terms of the work environment that I wanted to create. And I think if you talk to any people who've worked at Pikcells, they'd probably agree that it's quite a fun place to work, and there's a good team bond. And we always get out doing stuff together, and we do have fun while we're there. But I think one of the big things as well with that Incredibles documentary was that sense of excitement, that comes from always pushing and working on something that's cutting edge. And I think that's also something that I've tried to incorporate, is that we have our lab page on our website where we're always kind of tinkering with new technology, and we're always testing stuff, and I think that's really important.
Do you allocate the time to do that?
No, not really. We just, something comes out, or maybe a client will suggest that they want something, and we'll just go, right, okay, we'll start experimenting with that. But a lot of the time, it does turn into real work. So, and if we'd have just stuck doing images of interiors and kitchens, I don't think we would be as good as we are today, and as as big and as kind of successful. I think it's just something that's now part of the DNA of the company, is to kind of keep experimenting and keep playing with things. And if new stuff does come in, we have certain people that are their job is to kind of test that and play around with it, which works really well. Like, we don't test things on live projects. That's one of our mantras, you know.
Okay.
We have a process where somebody else will test it outside of the project, and then they'll test it in a few scenarios. They have to put it through the render farm. They have to see if it works with Corona. They have to, they have to satisfy all this criteria, and then it will go into the pipeline.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you test something on a live job,
But I love that you're so meticulous about all these processes. I think that a lot of people, they still act a little bit more like, whatever goes.
I think it only takes a few, working weekends and Christmas for you to realise that this can't go on forever,
Yeah, you're right.
And people going home late, and one of the things we say is, people get to go home on time at our place.
Yeah.
And that's why we are as anal as we are, because, you want people to go home and have a good work-life balance, and I think that only comes from being super organised. CG is just it's so mad, isn't it? There's so many variables involved.
Yes.
So many things can go wrong on a daily basis.
Yes.
So we try and kind of control what we can control. You can never control the client, that sort of thing. But everything else we can kind of manage.
Okay, so since we're talking about this kind of stuff, let's talk a little bit about productivity. Are there any sort of rituals that you have in order for you to be productive? And I give you an example. Myself, I always make notes, and during the day, as I do stuff, I tick them off. This makes me feel like I'm achieving more. What about you?
I used to keep notes. And I've kind of moved it around various things. So I've gone from Trello to Google Tasks, a few other things as well, but I've kind of settled on putting things in the Google Calendar and just moving them around every day. So every day I'll probably have 5 or 6 things that I need to do, and then I'll probably get through 2 or 3 of them, and then just keep moving them every day. But I think that process at the end of the day of having to, it's like musical chairs, you just keep moving these things around, but tasks, I just forget about them. They'll go somewhere and I forget about them, but if it's a calendar thing, it pops up and it reminds me all the time. And then at the end of the day, I just move them, and again, it reminds you again that it needs doing, so that seems to work pretty well for me.
Okay, since, this makes me think of pop-up notifications, I have to do this, I have to do that. It kind of makes me stressed a little bit. I always wanted to ask you, to talk a little bit about the mental sanity of the industry. You and I, as I said in the beginning of this, had a conversation about this. Let me ask you how you manage to keep yourself with your head above the water during these years, because this is a tough job. A lot of people, they just get the blitz and glamour of this industry. They see people publishing projects, they see people going and speak at conferences, but what they don't see the, sometimes the weekends and the holidays that you have to stay on a computer and work. They don't see the angry emails of the clients.
Well, yeah, there are. I mean, certainly setting up a company and stuff, there's a lot of dark days glued to your machine. And I mean, in the early days, a lot of that was down to me just kind of slogging it out in the office. More recently, when Matt came on board, so Matt's one of the 3 directors at Pikcells. Matt's been with us about 7 or 8 years now, and he needs very little sleep, and he struggles to say no to things. So he's kind of taken the baton on of being the one who was in the office all the time. So we spent a lot of nights drinking beer in the office, working all night, which was quite fun actually. But you can't do it forever, you get wives and kids, and you realise that, you have to do something about it. So, and I think we've both had times when, you get those kind of anxiety chest pains where you're like, oh, you wake up in the morning, you realise all the things you've got to do. And I mean, the only way to deal with that really is is to kind of manage what you are kind of committing to. So I think there was definitely a point about 5 or 6 years ago where we just started saying no to clients. We started saying, we can't do that, or this is unrealistic. And we found that, they didn't just walk away. They just turned around and they were quite understanding, and they would give us an extension, or, the world would go on. It wasn't like everything came collapsing down. So that was quite a big realization for us to kind of push back quite a lot. And I think since we started doing that, it's been a lot more relaxing at work. And we also just used to take too much on ourselves. And I think a big thing for us both has been, delegation and giving other people more responsibility. Mm-hmm. And you can't grow unless you do that as well. That's quite a big one. If you want to grow the team, you have to delegate, and you have to kind of get other people on board and train them up and let them deal with clients. And I think we were a bit too overprotective of client contact, with other artists. But now we're quite relaxed about it. So we have 3 producers in the office, and they deal with a lot of the client day-to-day communication. And me and Matt are more kind of working on the business, not in it, as the saying goes. And I think that helps, just about being realistic about what you can achieve. I think recognition is a big one for people. It's certainly, creatives have a certain mindset, and I think recognition is quite an important part of the fuel that makes up a creative person. It certainly is for me anyway. I think it's nice to be recognised for stuff. But I think, going back to what you were saying there, a sense of perspective is also important on, like, this is a job. And I think it's easy to forget that sometimes. You get so engrossed in everything that sometimes you've got to kind of stop and go, right, hang on a minute. If we don't agree to this, or we don't do it, what's the worst that could happen? And, when you actually analyse it, it's not that bad, It could be a lot worse. So I think that can help as well with your kind of mental sanity. But I also think a lot of the time people don't stop to kind of organise, the pipeline and the workflow. And I think, for us, that's a massive thing, and it is a big stress reliever to have somebody. So we have Jamie at work, who's our technical supervisor, and his job is to kind of grease the wheels of the whole process. So every week we sit down and we discuss, what's working, what's not working, and he will write a script, or he will, change a render node that's always bombing or something like that. And to have somebody there constantly working on the infrastructure and the pipeline, it's a big stress reliever for everybody else, because they can just get on with being creative and not have to worry about the technical things, And software like Corona's a big help as well. We made the switch a couple of years ago, and it's so nice not to have as many buttons to press. To just get in there, start lighting it, put your cameras around, and you're away. You don't, like with V-Ray was great, but there was just too many things to think about for us. Mm-hmm. We're not doing big films animations, so Corona was just this perfect solution, which makes it really easy, really easy to be creative again.
Let me ask you, what is one of the things that you wish you had known when you first started out?
So this is kind of hard to just pin on one thing. There's so many things.
Let's name 3.
Yeah, I'll narrow it down to 3. So because we started straight from university, I always used to wish that I'd worked in another CG studio, because basically everything we've done, we've had to kind of figure out ourselves. Mm-hmm. So, 16, 17 years ago, there weren't any tutorials on how to run a business, certainly a CG business. There was nothing around, how to do ArcViz and all that sort of thing. You had to go digging, and, there were a few tutorials on how to use render engines, but it was very hard to find information. So I always used to wish that we had that we'd worked somewhere for a few years just to pick up some bits of information on how to structure everything, how to deal with clients, all that sort of thing. But then in recent years, you realise the value of figuring these things out yourself. I think there is a big value in that, and I think it's served us well now in the position we are. But it certainly took us. It probably added 5 years onto the length of the business. I think we could have got to where we are a bit faster, but we wouldn't have had that experience, let's say, of building it up.
And I think that nowadays it's even more difficult. I think that because of all the competition, it's even more difficult to make it, because if you don't go and work in another office where they already know how to do stuff, the amount of stuff that you have to figure out is even more, and it's there's just so much competition that it's almost like a suicide for somebody young to get into the market and hope, to build a company in today's market. People hate me for saying that, because everybody says, I can create the best company ever. But the reality is that nowadays there is so much competition, and the moment the clients know that you're brand new, they just jump at you trying to, squeeze as much as they can out of you.
Yeah, I think it is super hard nowadays, and I think a lot of the inquiries that come through to us are because we're so easily findable on the internet. I think that comes from years of articles and things that are put out, and people can find us, and there's a lot of information out there on us, and we do get a lot of inquiries of that form. But
what about relationships with your existing clients? Do they refer you to other clients?
Yeah. A lot of our business is word of mouth and referrals, which has been great. It's something we've worked hard on, building relationships with clients. The clients that just you can tell them now when they get in touch, they're just after a quick project. They dangle carrots, but they're not actually interested in taking it any further. So we try and stay away from companies like that, because these architecture projects that come in, they always want them in 2 weeks. You'll be there all night changing because they've changed the design. So we stay away from those kind of projects, because the work might be good at the end of it, but nobody enjoys it. And I think we don't need to do those anymore, so we don't do them.
I think this is one of the most beautiful phrases that an artist can say to themselves. We don't need to do those anymore.
Yeah, I think the guys starting out can do those jobs because they need to,
and they got the energy.
Yeah, they've got the energy. They've got the time, and it's good experience for them. But for us, we've been there and done it, and if people are depressed at the end of it, then what's the point?
Yeah, you're right. Totally right. Okay, let me ask you, since we're talking about this, what is something that you failed at, but that turned out to be a great life lesson?
So, about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a few senior guys who we felt were getting itchy feet, and we wanted to keep them inspired and keep them at the company. So a lot of people have been talking about creating a online model store. So we set one up, we invested a load of money in it, and the idea was that these senior guys we'd give them shares in it and they'd run it, and it would be a good way to keep them interested, and it would be this kind of sideline project. And we set it all up. We pumped a load of money into it, and we got a load of models on there. And it was, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember Umo Lab? Did you ever hear about that?
What was it called?
Umo Lab.
I don't think I can.
No, it was only around for a few years, and it did all right. But basically, we set it up, and we built it, and then because because these guys hadn't kind of necessarily come up with the idea or been invested too much in it, they weren't really bothered about it too much. So we'd spent a lot of money building this thing to try and keep these guys, and essentially we were creating a new company, but we weren't treating it like that. Mm-hmm. We just set it up as this thing that you could just build it and then it would run itself. But it needed nurturing like all successful businesses, and it needed full-time staff, to keep it going. And eventually, it just kind of fizzled out, and it was costing more to maintain than it was to than it was bringing in. So we kind of had to fold it up, and it sounds a bit daft because we were already running a successful business. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes you can master something and you just kind of forget the basics, or you take it for granted.
Yes.
You did something years ago, you just it's second nature to you. You tend not to think about it too much. But yeah, so you can't force somebody to be invested in something. They have to that passion has to come naturally.
And I think this is the biggest takeaway, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So, the lesson for us was that you can't force somebody to like something or be passionate about something. It has to come from within,
What happened to these guys?
They all left.
So there you go.
They didn't leave because of that, though. They were ready to go. So, we'd set this whole thing up to kind of give them something to keep them here, and they were just ready to go. So, again, you can't force somebody to do something. If it's their time to go, then they're just going to go. So yeah, it was a big lesson for us.
So we already talked about this. You already mentioned the fact that there was a time where you started to say no to clients, and I think that for a lot of young artists and young entrepreneurs, saying no, it's almost like it's counterproductive because they see it as a way to reject business. But the reality is that no is a powerful tool if you know how to use it. Yeah. Can you expand a little bit on this? How do you guys use the no with your clients, and how do you use these to leverage, your influence as experts and get actually more work done?
So I think if you're going to say no to people, there has to be a reason. So, you have to have a plan for the business or for yourself, and for us, we stopped taking on, like I said, the architecture work a few years ago, because it didn't fit with our plan of where we wanted to be and the kind of work we wanted to do. And I think, a lot of businesses, you develop a sense of who you are and the kind of work you're really good at and the kind of work you're not good at. So, a few years ago, we decided that we weren't really set up to do, the big ArcViz projects. So we just started turning them away, and I think everyone was much happier for it. We will do them, but it has to be a client who's invested in building a relationship. And we tend to just take on bigger jobs now. So if a large developer comes and they're wanting to sign up for, a couple of years, and it's regular work and everyone understands that we need a certain amount of time to do it, then we'll take those jobs on. They're great jobs. But, if somebody comes and it's a competition, it's 2 weeks, then we just say no, because, it doesn't fit with our plan of who we are and what we do best. So I think basically if you're going to start saying no to stuff, it has to be part of a plan, or for us anyway, that's what works best. We know who we are as a company, we know where we want to be, and if jobs come along that don't fit with that, then it's easy to say no. But you've got to have that plan first. Otherwise, you say no based on, can we do it in the time, or is there enough money in it? But I think for us, is it the kind of work we want to do? If it is, then we'll squeeze it in, we'll do it. But if it's not, then we just say no.
I understand. Let me ask you instead about books that influenced you and that you would recommend anybody else, that look at you and see what you have built, and you can say, this book actually helped me to find out a little bit more about myself as a person, as an entrepreneur, as an artist? I don't know. Yeah. Any book that you think that might be beneficial for those who are listening?
So I'm a big fan of the psychology books and the business and self-help stuff, especially when we were first starting the business up, and there was not much information around. So I kind of dive into these books and read a lot of them. And there was a few that really kind of resonated with me. One was the E-Myth.
Okay.
I think E stands for entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. It's quite an old book. But the kind of basis of that is just because you know the technical side of a business. So for us, just because we can do nice renderings doesn't mean you can run a business. Mm. That's the whole premise of the book. And it talks about, creating workflows and creating plans and then hiring people underneath you to kind of carry out those plans. And, those people don't necessarily need to be really experienced. They just need the right character that fits with your own values. So that was a really great book. That really helped. And that was the thing that triggered me to start doing the knowledge-based articles, and our internal knowledge base. Mm-hmm. And then there was another one called How to Be a Graphic Designer Without Losing Your Soul. Have you heard of this one?
Never, but I'm making a note.
It's a fantastic book. It's probably about 10 years old now, but it's done by a British designer called Adrian Shaughnessy, he'd been running a really good graphic design studio called Intro for about 20 or 30 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And he'd left to pursue other interests. But, he talks about setting up a studio, choosing the right partner, employing people better than you, all that sort of thing. Interactions with people you meet along the way, so on your kind of rise to success, the people that you meet, you've got to kind of treat everyone with the same respect that you would treat like a new client who's going to give you, all these big jobs. But it's a really great book and amazing typography as well, because the guy was a designer, the design of the book was just beautiful. And then the Steve Jobs autobiography.
No, that's a good one.
I love that book, yeah. The Walter Isaacson one. Such a good book. But I think the main thing that I take away from that is just that excitement of, that environment of creating something new and innovating and, building a team and all that sort of thing. That just, it gives me that sense of excitement, for building a business and building something has an impact on people.
I can totally relate. I think that this was really the book that set me on the path to full-time entrepreneurship. It doesn't mean that it made me do it good. It just motivated me. And I remember reading that book. I still had a job. And I remember going to work, and the owner of the company, which is a multi-million company at the time, I knew that he read the book because he was behaving in the same exact way as Steve Jobs. Yeah. And I was like, you see, this is, for instance, one of those things that I would say, if you read that book, that's not what you should get from the book. That's not how you should behave. What you need to pay attention to is, what does it take to build the dream? Not the role model part. But anyway.
I have to admit, I did start doing a bit of Steve Jobs. And I quickly realised that it is,
reality bending.
I think I tried it for about a week or two. Been a total dick to everybody. And
until somebody slashed your tires.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was parking in disabled spaces and all sorts.
Okay, what about bad recommendations that you heard? Maybe that's one that you have heard in your profession, and that turned out to be very bad advice.
I couldn't think of anything for this. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
The only thing I can think, I mean, not things that I've heard, but things that I see, and it's mainly to do with a lot of the job applications that come through to us. So we review a lot of these, and I don't know, the universities that are, teaching people how to apply for jobs, but somebody needs to do a video on how to apply for a job.
Okay, I'm taking the hint.
Because the best ones is just an email saying why they want to work at our place, and then a link to their portfolio. I mean, I think that's all you need sometimes. But then quite often you get massive CVs telling you, how they worked at various supermarkets, and then there's a note at the bottom which says, portfolio available on request. And you're like, come on, just send me the portfolio. But I'm not going to email you back and say, can you send me the portfolio, please? So I mean, that's all I could think of. It's just a kind of bone of contention of mine.
I have a friend, she is also an architect, and she told me that she never got a job with an email and a portfolio. She always went knocking on the door of the person that she wanted to work with, and she said, listen, this is the only place where I want to work at. And the guy, always was like, you know what, okay, just come in for a trial. And, yeah. I don't know. I think that this is very subjective. I remember one of my teachers telling me how to do my portfolio, and that portfolio got me 0 jobs, and it was a 30 pages portfolio with work, with, and the majority of my jobs came from the stuff that I was putting out online. All the social media, the the workshops, the activities. People were just getting in touch, and they were like, hey, we saw what you did. Would you like and come and do it for us? And eventually that's another thing that I want to say is that, going back to the thing of entrepreneurship, there is such a positive stigma on the word entrepreneurship today. But the reality is, and I was thinking about it a couple of days ago, my biggest, richest moments in my life were always linked to when I was working for a company as a freelancer doing whatever kind of service. And the gig, I got it because of the stuff that I was doing as an entrepreneur. And so, people always put the emphasis on having to create their own company, when actually you can behave as an entrepreneur and you can work as an entrepreneur on yourself and put all that effort into somebody else's company, because somebody might be better than you and making money than you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't always have to end in a company. There's many ways to be an entrepreneur.
There is a very cool author. He's from Italy and he just does videos in Italian. His name is Marco Montemagno, and he talks always about this. It says, today you gotta be the entrepreneur of yourself, and yourself needs to be the company. And it doesn't matter who you end up working for. If you do remain in your mindset as an entrepreneur of yourself, then you'll be fine, because whoever you're going to work for, they're going to see that, you have what it takes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, we've had people come in and they care about the company more than we do. They just, and it's amazing when that happens.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you've got to look after those people, because they're the backbone of the company.
And then this becomes your job to have to look after them, because you know that they are going to take care of the business. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's beautiful when it happens.
It is beautiful, mate. Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the community. Do you think that as it is today, the community kind of supports itself? Do you think that we do as a community foster a good spirit? Do you think that there are things that could be done better?
Yeah, I think, certainly in the last few years, people like yourself, have had a massive impact on the community. and I think it's changed quite a lot since we started up, and we've only got involved in it really last year. We've only started going to events, and it's been a real eye opener for us. The D2 was we had such good fun, and we met some amazing people that we should have met years ago. Do you know what I mean? If we feel so bad for not doing this earlier. And it's just so good to meet people and exchange information and talk about pricing and business issues. And a lot of people are having the same issues, as us. And it was really reassuring to speak to people. So I think the community is pretty good. I mean, I like how it's small enough for you to know most people. I like that, I think eventually it will probably get to web design, where it just, or web development, where it's so massive that you're not going to know everybody. But I think at the minute it's a really nice size. You have these events like D2 and you can chat to anybody and develop a relationship. It's really good. But I think one thing that I don't think there's enough of is a kind of recognition of the heritage. So there's quite a lot of companies that paved the way for the ArcViz community that have that don't really get enough credit anymore. Now maybe that's because they don't exist anymore, but I don't know whether there could be like a Hall of Fame on the 3D Awards or something, for some of these older companies, or like a lifetime achievement. I don't know, something like that. But
we could make one in Vienna, with like the stars on the floor and the hands of the
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
No, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, when we were learning, the trade, there's a lot of companies who and they were producing phenomenal work back in the early 2000s. That's comparable to the stuff today, really, and the tools they had were rubbish. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, of course.
There's a bit of that could be kind of, dredged back up and put into people's minds.
I remember when I first started to study architecture, and I was going to those like open houses, and I would see like projects of architects rendered in 3D or animated, and I was like, at that time we were still drawing by hand. It was 2006. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, this thing, it's amazing. I never thought that I could do that kind of stuff, because it felt like miles and miles away from what we were doing in architecture. And at the same time, nowadays we see so many people that don't give us enough credit for the work that we do, for God knows what reason. I don't know, like sometimes I try to talk to artists to make them understand that what we do, it's actually still really, really important and difficult, Even with the software that it's getting easier and easier to use, it's not like everybody can make stunning work,
No, you still need to be good, and you still need to work at your craft and all that sort of thing. It's not just going to happen, but it is a lot easier nowadays. The amount of models and resources that are out there, and the ease of the software. There's so many good images floating around. And I remember the guys at the Boundary were talking about the difference between commercial work and personal work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a massive factor as well. I think pretty much everyone could create a good bit of personal work, with no client changes and all that sort of thing. But there's massive respect to people who are doing the top quality work with the commercial work, because it is very difficult.
Yes.
Taking somebody else's idea and guiding them along the way, with all the changes and the time restraints and all that sort of thing, it's something that has to be worked out quite a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Richard, let me ask you, do you ever think about the idea of purpose? And more in the specific, have you ever thought about your own purpose?
Yeah, well, again, when you're kind of chained to the desk in the early days, you're the only guy in the office at 3 a.m, and 3D modeling can be quite therapeutic. You can go into this kind of meditative state, It's like playing an instrument or something. And yeah, I did used to think about this a lot in those days. And, I think you kind of question where you are in life, and or I did anyway. What am I doing this for? And it's obviously, purpose is different for everybody, but for me, it always my thinking always came back to just trying to do something worthwhile, and then it's kind of defining what is worthwhile, and I think it's just trying to have a positive influence in the world, and with family and friends, and then just doing something that I enjoy. But I think that's another thing that takes quite a lot of time to realise. What do I enjoy, and you've got to try lots of different things to kind of figure that out. I mean, for me, it's always been something involving design and art. It's just something I've always been drawn to. So yeah, I think in terms of purpose, it would just be trying to do something worthwhile that I also enjoy. That has a positive impact.
Let me add something to what you just said. You said you want to make the world a better place, and I have had people in the past commenting and saying, you're just making renderings, how do you make the world a better place? You are a person that is giving a job to 25 people. This is your contribution in trying to make the world a better place. If people are blinded and they are not able to see that far, what it is that we do when we do things, it's on them. But I do understand what you mean when you say that you're trying, to make your own contribution. And for that, the reason why I made this point, it's because I also want those who are listening, and maybe even your team, to understand what it takes for you to create the infrastructure, to give jobs to people, and to be, responsible for their lives as well.
Yeah, I think that is something that it's easy to take for granted, but you are providing that sense of purpose to other people and giving them a nice place to work and stuff. But I mean, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily making the world a better place. I wouldn't say I'm there yet. I'm just saying that that's kind of the end goal. But I think you're right. You can't take that for granted. You are creating jobs for people, and giving them a nice life, a nice place to work, and that is important. But I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily ticking that box.
Not yet.
To the level I want it. Yeah.
Okay, so just to remain on this, what does success look like to you?
Well, I read a really good book last year called Barking Up the Wrong Tree.
Oh, yes, I know it.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic book, really good. So this goes into the science and data around success. But it's really well written, really funny book. But it kind of, the summary of it is that it's all about knowing yourself. So you have to know yourself, and then you have to align where you are with where you want to be. And there's obviously many factors in that, like happiness, achievement, and significance, and stuff like legacy. But so for me, it's kind of, I know where I want to be, and it's just kind of, getting to that point. But I think the key thing for me was just like knowing yourself, understanding what you want in life, and then you have to kind of set a path to get there. But I think it's kind of an ongoing thing as well. I never think you don't get there and go, yes, this is it, and then put your feet up. It just keeps going. Doesn't it?
I love the analogy, and now I'm picturing myself being successful and be like, all right, we're done for today. No, but I can relate to this answer, and the reason why I was looking in that direction, it's because I have it laying around somewhere. This year I've started with putting books into my toilet so that at least one chapter a day I have to read.
Yeah.
But now I don't know what the book is. But I think, it's a very good read, and it's actually also very easy. So, if people want to look it up.
It took me a long time to read it, actually, because I think there was a bit in the middle where it just got a bit boring, but it is a great book. You've got to struggle through it, but it's fantastic, man.
Richard, believe it or not, we've been going for more than an hour. I know that you're busy and that you have to leave. I just want to thank you for taking the time for doing this. If people want to find you, where is best to reach you?
You can get me at richard@pikcells.com, or just check out the website, pikcells.com. We're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Vimeo. So yeah, just if anybody wants to chat to me about anything, they can email me.
I'll try to put all the links in the description of the video, so don't worry.
Yeah.
Richard, thanks a lot for doing this. I'm going to stop the recording. Don't go anywhere so that I can say thank you one more time, okay?
Okay, mate, thank you.
Thanks a lot for doing this, man.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.